Hello and welcome to the show. It's so nice to have you joining me for not only my 5th annual Christmas video, but the very last launch title deep dives. So we have a great show for you today. And be sure to stay till the end of the show where I'll be ranking each one of the launch titles from number 9 all the way to number 1. You don't want to miss it. Imagine, if you will, the year is 1978. You're a kid on Christmas morning and there's only one thing on your list: Atari cartridges. You already know you're getting socks because you always get socks. But this could be the year. You race downstairs, heart pounding, and there it is, a cartridge-shaped box wrapped in shiny holiday paper, the glow of Christmas lights dancing across its surface. The anticipation is unbearable. Could it be RC Battle? Super Breakout? Maybe one of those brand new sports titles? You can almost hear the TV hum, the joystick clicking in your hands. The moment arrives. You tear away the paper, and it reads Basic Math. And that is the topic for today's video. Before we get started, if you like my videos, please consider hitting those like and subscribe buttons below, and hit the bell icon if you want to be notified of new videos. It really helps out a small channel like this one, and it is highly appreciated. Now, onto the video. Atari presents Basic Math, the thrill of numbers. Finally, the fun of school on your television. Whether it's addition, subtraction, or the sheer thrill of multiplication, Basic Math lets kids experience all the edge-of-your-seat excitement of solving math problems. In 1977, amid all the exciting arcade-style launch games, the Atari VCS also produced their first educational title, Basic Math. The idea was simple. Parents were the ones buying these systems, and Atari knew the console would seem even more appealing if it was more than just a gaming machine. And if it could help teach kids a little math, all the better. Atari wasn't the only company betting on educational games as a selling point. Its 1977 competitors were right there too. The Channel F offered a pair of math quiz cartridges by developer Vilas Munshi, one focusing on addition and subtraction, the other on multiplication and division. The RCA Studio 2 joined in with Math Fun, a game that rewarded players based on how quickly they answered each math problem. In the years that followed, other consoles took their turn with math titles. The Odyssey 2 featured Mathemagic, the Bally Arcade added elementary math, and Intellivision delivered Electro Company Math. Each system had its own controllers and visual styles, but underneath it all, they were all variations on the same familiar math drill formula. Basic Math's lead designer was Gary Palmer, who joined Atari in February 1977. It's the only known title he developed for the Atari VCS. His history mirrors that of Ed Riddle. Both worked on hardware before stepping over to design one of the console's launch titles. Before Basic Math, Palmer built debugging stations used by Atari's game programmers. Later, he helped develop the Atari 400 and 800 computers before eventually leaving the company. Unfortunately, no photos of him seem to exist, and his post-Atari career remains a bit of a mystery. Sears released the same title under the Telegames label, rebranding it as Math. Yes, try to contain your excitement. The box art for Basic Math was created by Susan Jekyll, a San Jose State art graduate who connected with Atari through a fellow artist and current husband, Rick Gaitis. This was her first design for Atari, and she described it as her most fanciful and loosest in style. Jekyll went on to illustrate other Atari titles, including A Game of Concentration and one of my personal favorites, Adventure. Basic Math offers 8 different game variations. In the first 4, the player chooses the starting number at the top of the equation, while the computer picks the second. In the remaining 4, the computer selects both numbers, leaving you to do all the work. Each game runs through 10 rounds of arithmetic problems: addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division. At the bottom of the screen, you move the joystick to cycle through the digits 0 through 9 to fill in the answers. And here's where things get a little tricky. You can move freely across the input slots, but if you don't drop the correct answer in the right slot, the game will mark it as wrong anyway. That little quirk could be pretty frustrating for kids, especially if they're unsure which slot the game wants. Players earn 1 point for each correct answer. At the end of each round, the total number of problems, which is always 10, is displayed on the right, while your score appears on the left. The Atari VCS's 2 difficulty switches can further tweak the gameplay. The right switch determines whether a timer is active, while the left switch adjusts how much time you get. In the first 4 game modes, it sets the timer to either 12 or 24 seconds. In the remaining 4 modes, it decides whether you tackle 2-digit problems with a 24-second limit or single-digit problems with just 12 seconds to answer. In an effort to boost its appeal, Basic Math was re-released in January 1980 under the new title, Fun with Numbers. Atari stopped producing new cartridges by January 1982, but the game stuck around in stores well into 1988. I'll spare you a deep dive into all the contemporary reviews, but the consensus was clear. Basic Math had its drawbacks. Critics pointed to the overly complicated controls, lackluster graphics, and limited educational value. After all, the game didn't teach you how to arrive at the correct answer. On the plus side, reviewers enjoyed the musical jingles for correct answers and the time challenges, which added a little excitement. Over time, retrospective reviews only reinforced this view. While it might help kids practice arithmetic, it's ultimately a clunky, low-quality game that hasn't aged well. And that is the main takeaway. Atari's first educational title doesn't actually educate. It doesn't teach you how to arrive at the correct answer. You're just solving math problems. While it might not be the most exciting game in the Atari library, Basic Math holds a special place in history as one of the earliest attempts to merge video games and education. So were you an Atari math whiz, or do you prefer to stick with Space Invaders? For me, I'll stick with Space Invaders. While having tackled gameplay for each of the launch titles, I now feel somewhat qualified to give you my personal ranking for all of them. I spent time with each game, taken notes, replayed a few more times than I probably needed to, and tried to judge them not only by their historical importance, but how well they actually hold up today. And of course, this is just my list. Your mileage may vary, and that's half the fun. While ranking these, I found they naturally sorted into 3 main groups: the bad, the mediocre, and the best. The top titles are the ones with real play value, the games I kept finding excuses to go back to. I think it comes at no surprise that Basic Math lands at number 9. There's really no fun to be had here, and the sales figures seem to agree with me. I never fired up a game console hoping to work through math problems, and I doubt many kids did either. This one was an easy pick for last place. The next 4 titles sit pretty close together, and honestly, their order could shift depending on what genre you enjoy most. Street Racer definitely brought some interesting variations to the table, but in the end, the stiff controls and awkward crash mechanics drag it down. That's why it ends up here in the number 8 spot. If you're a fan of card games, you might rank blackjack a little higher than I did. At its core, it's a perfectly serviceable game of blackjack. But the extremely minimal graphics and sound, the absence of suits, and the lack of a full set of rules keep it from climbing the list. So for me, it settles comfortably at number 7. I kept swapping the last two back and forth, but eventually Surround settled into the number 6 spot. This is one of those games that benefits hugely from having another human player. Against the vintage AI, though, things fall apart fast. The computer makes strange, almost random moves that lead to short, awkward matches. Fun with friends, but not so much solo. Hey, you're flying through space and shooting other spaceships. What's not to like? That alone helps Starship claim the number 5 position. It's a respectable conversion of Atari Starship 1, so if you enjoy the arcade game, you'll definitely appreciate having a home version. The bonus landing game is also a nice touch, and that little extra variety nudged it just above Surround for me. Now we're getting into the really tough territory. These last 4 were extremely difficult to rank against each other. The Atari VCS was engineered to play 2 things, Tank and Pong. And Video Olympics does deliver a very solid take on Pong, complete with a computer opponent that's surprisingly competent for the era. The problem is, how far can you stretch Pong before it stops being good? Turns out, not very far. Still, if you have a second player, foosball is worth a few rounds. Video Olympics takes the number 4 position. What happens when you take a classic Carnival shooting gallery and move it onto a home console? You get Air-Sea Battle. It's essentially a test of hand-eye coordination as you fire at targets drifting by at different speeds. For such a simple concept, it's surprisingly addictive, especially when you're trying to outshoot a computer opponent whose entire strategy is hold the fire button down. We're blasting our way into the 3rd position with Air-Sea Battle. Okay, we're down to the final 2. I never had Indy 500 as a kid, but I've got to say I really enjoyed picking up a driving controller and tearing around those tracks. It's a delicate mix of speed and precision, and even the time trial mode is solid if you don't have a second player available. I actually found myself playing this one longer than I needed to for the video footage, which says a lot. Indy 500 races into the number 2 spot. As I mentioned back in the Video Olympics entry, the Atari VCS was built with Pong and Tank in mind, so it's probably no surprise that Combat takes the #1 position and deserved to be the pack-in game. Not only do you get tank battles, but there are also variations featuring biplanes and jets. The only real downside is the lack of a true single-player mode. But bring in a second player, and this game absolutely shines. Combat earns its place at the top. And there you have it, every Atari VCS launch title, bravely ranked from, please don't make me do math, all the way up to, I could play this for hours and forget what decade I'm in. But that's the charm of the VCS launch lineup. It's a time capsule of wild ideas, technical limitations, questionable AI, and designers trying to figure out what a home video game even was. Of course, rankings are always subjective, so your own list might look completely different. And that's part of what makes revisiting these early titles so enjoyable. Whether you agree, disagree, or now feel inspired to fire up a few of your own favorites, please let me know in the comments below. Thanks for coming along for the ride through the very first chapter of Atari VCS gaming.